Have you ever wondered why some organizations are more successful in modern day business? Maybe it's because they're agile. The Business Agility Report of 2020 shows that the average maturity of organizations employing agile working increased by staggering 9%. Listen in to understand why agile is more relevant than ever, what agile values are, and what modern agile thinking looks like. My name's Daniel, I'm an agile catalyst, and in this video I'm giving you a way too short introduction into agility. When we want a quick answer on what is agile, we can take a look at definitions that people in the industry give us. There's a nice definition from the German consultant Svenja Hofert, who my team and I employ very often. We like to adapt it a bit. We say being agile means to have the ability to quickly and flexibly adapt to changing environments via continuous experimenting and learning in order to survive and thrive on the market. In order to understand why agile is more relevant these days than it was ever before, there are two streams of change that we should look into. Starting with the first stream, the different way we work, we should start in the beginning of the 20th century. Back then, manual labor was the primary way of working. Factories were powered by the muscle of workers who were instructed to produce physical goods that we could then again sell and make real money of. The first shift in the perception of work came in the early 20th century when Frederick Taylor came up with the idea of the economic man. Frederick Taylor started to think about work from a position where people were streaming into cities and towns from the countryside. They were minimally qualified to do their work and they need to be instructed properly in order to be effective. He came up with the idea of splitting the thinking part of work and the doing part of work. So this was the first conception of management as we know it today. The basic idea was that you need some educated people to think about the way work should be conducted, and then you need to train and organize people in order to execute the plans effectively. Back then, he also assumed that people were basically rational beings who worked for maximizing their own profits. Paying people monetary rewards or annual bonuses stems from this line of thinking. But what we have to look at is the way work changed. While it was primarily manual labor in the beginning of the century, by the end of the century what was prevailing were cognitive and creative efforts. Technology had a huge impact on how we do our work. Many workers today are not paid for their muscle power, but for their brain power. So instead of having many hands at work, we are trying to get many brains to think about new problems, new solutions. With the change to knowledge work, we also came to understand that the traditional way of managing doesn't work anymore. New generations coming to the market are adapted to new technologies and new work environments. We also understand that with creative and innovative knowledge work, monetary rewards are not working any longer. In a study funded by the Federal Reserve Bank of America, people were paid higher bonuses when they succeeded in cognitive tasks. What they figured out is that people did not perform better when you paid them higher bonuses. In fact, they even performed worse. The second stream of change that we want to look at is the change in way the market behaves. We can get a good insight in the changing market behavior when we look at the data of the Recording Industry Association of America. For a long time, the primary product of the music industry were LPs and vinyl discs. They were around successfully until the late 1980s. By the late 1970s, a new technology emerged and became successful on the market. Tapes started to replace vinyl discs and LPs, and LPs were not really around anymore in the 1990s. Then again, in the 1990s, the CD came to the market, and it was the most dominating music product until the early 2000s. So what happened in the 2000s? Well, the internet got more and more spread around the globe. And with new technology and a more easier access to digital goods, people started to shift their consumer behavior. Selling physical media with music on it was in decline. Instead, virtual downloads and digital music was on the rise. Around 2015, the market changed again. Technology took another leap, and streaming technologies were on the rise. What we can see when taking a look at the data is that the life cycle of products is getting shorter and shorter. While in the beginning LPs were around for more than 30 years, it shrank down for about 10 years for CDs and only 5 years for music downloads. And who knows how long streaming will be relevant. The market is changing even today. With those two streams of change, the changing work environments and the changing market speeds, we can see that our world is more complex and layered than we thought in the early 20th century. We can also say that we're living in a VUCA world. VUCA is an acronym and it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Our world is volatile in the sense that environments are constantly changing with ever increasing speed and nothing stays the same. This volatility makes it harder to predict the future. So the learnings that we had in the 1970s, 80s, and 1990s are no longer applicable to predicting the future. Also, increasing technology and globalization interconnects the world even more. From that interconnectedness comes increasing complexity, and cause and effect are not easily relatable anymore. One-size-fits-all approaches don't work any longer, and we know that best practices are good advice at best. There's no black and white decisions anymore. Everything that we decide has a multitude of consequences due to the complexity. And when we understand that we're living in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, we can understand that seeking for the one single answer and truth is nothing but a trap. This is where Agile thinking comes in. With Agile, we try to find a new way of making better decisions that help us to orient ourselves in this complex world. In order to find our way around in this layered world, we employ empiric thinking. Empiric thinking means to make decisions based on the learnings that we already have in the context that we are in. One of the most prominent examples for empiric working in the business world is called the Deming cycle or the plan, do, check, act cycle. Before we do something, we think about the outcomes and lay out a plan of action that we think leads us to the desired results. Then we go there and implement the plan to reality. We take all the actions required. And while we're doing that, we're constantly checking if we're still on the right track. When we figure out that what we did does not lead to success, or that maybe our assumptions were wrong, we adjust our behavior and act differently. And then we start with planning our next step again. Doing it and then checking again and again, changing our behavior to be more successful in the future. That way we constantly reflect if we're achieving success and we adapt our behavior to changing circumstances. And that's the base of agility. There's a metaphor we can employ to understand it a bit better. It's like sailing a ship from London to New York. But while we're traveling across the seas, it gets foggy. And it gets so foggy that we can only see a few meters or miles ahead. So in some way the fog limits our visibility of the future. We can see what is directly in our path right in front of us, but we don't know if in the fog a few miles ahead there lies an iceberg waiting for us, or whether there's a safe harbor where we can anchor for some time. From time to time, we stop to figure out where we are. We take a look at our compass. Maybe we can see the stars to orient ourselves a bit. At these times, we correct our course. So we know where we started, we know where we want to go to, and we know what happened on the journey so far. Based on that knowledge, we make decisions that help us to set our course towards our goal. Agile working has some serious benefits. The Business Agility report that was conducted over the last years by the Business Agility Institute tells us that the most significant ones are increased collaboration and communication, better ways of working, and of course increased speed to market. Better collaboration communication stems from the fact that we let individuals decide how they best interact to achieve a goal. We don't rely on set in stone processes or rules and role frameworks, but we rather encourage people to figure out how they can achieve the goal best. This leads to better ways of working in general, where we try to push the decisions that have to be made in order to be successful in the business to the front line. By working in an agile way, we try to enable those people to make the right decisions to advance our business as best as they can. So with this increased speed of communication, the better collaboration and better decision making, we are able to increase our speed to market. Within an agile organization, we don't have to relay all the information that people on the front line gather through various layers of management and then back again, but they can take the decisions so the time from the conception of an idea or uncovering a problem until resolution and turning it into a valuable product shrinks to a minimum. The way we work in agility is nothing new. You could say they stand on the shoulders of giants. A major breakthrough in thinking about agile working came in the 1980s. It was back then when two Japanese researchers, Takeuchi and Nonaka, took an interest in how projects succeed at that time. Among many things, they figured out that one factor that contributes to success was overlapping project phases. While in traditional projects, you might know that we separate between the analysis or the conception of the project, the design phases and the implementation, and then maybe we want to check whether we were successful and achieved the goals, and then we'll roll it out. Now, they figured out that it's much better to have those separate phases overlapping, because when you do, so-called multi-learning teams can form. Those multi-learning teams contain all the different experts that you need to get your project delivered, and they can exchange while delivering results. So you're not getting handovers at each project phase, but you get more collaboration throughout the project with more eased handovers. And the more your phase is overlapping, the more successful your project tends to be. Another major learning that they had was that project teams that had a degree of freedom tended to be more successful. So managers who gave more control to the people instead of being bureaucratic organizers enabled those people. This research was picked up by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland in the 1990s. They built their own framework based on the research of the new product development game, and they called the framework Scrum, which is by now the most widely spread Agile framework that you can find. So where does the term Agile come in? In February 2001, veterans of software engineering projects met in Utah. By the end of the 13th of February, those 70 veterans crafted a document. And this document is now known as the Manifesto for Agile Software Development and gave the whole movement its name. The manifesto is based on 4 fundamental assumptions on how we can work better on projects. Of course, it's very much coined towards software development, but we can easily see how we can generalize it. The 4 statements, also called the value pairs, describe how we should work in order to achieve better results. The first of these statements is that individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. The idea here is very convincing. As projects in knowledge work, and back then in software development, were primarily driven by the brains of people, we need those people to interact. And all the processes and tools that we use should help people interact again. So instead of limiting the behavior of people via the use of constricting processes or even tools that dictate a workflow, we should encourage people to find their own way of working and then find the tools and processes that support their work best. The second statement in the manifesto is very much driven by the thought of software engineering. It's called working software over comprehensive documentation. So we can generalize it a bit. My way of explaining the statement is that the project documentation is not the project result. Obviously, we craft a lot of documentation that we need in order to get the project done, but in the end, what counts is what's the result of the project and not how much documentation we created. So the idea in Agile working is to focus on generating useful results that are valuable to the stakeholders and the users and the clients, rather than creating a huge paper trail. This again leads us to the third statement. That is, that customer collaboration is more important than contract negotiation. Of course, contracts are the lawful base for many of the endeavors that we do. They should not limit us in working. So instead of getting hooked on writing contracts and definitions for handovers or collaboration, we should instead actively collaborate. Our goal should be to build trustful relationship with our stakeholders in order to get their feedback and figure out their needs. So as contracts are relevant, of course, they should again not limit us and should not be in our way. They should be designed in a way so that they enable the collaboration that we need in order to get feedback and learn from the results and deliver great results. The fourth statement in the manifesto is maybe the one Agile is best known for. It reads, responding to change or following a plan. Similar to contracts, plans are useful as they give us some guidance, they help us get our thoughts in order, and they help us think about how we want to achieve a goal. Whenever we learn something new about our endeavor, we should update the plan rather than trying to come back to the plan. So the plan follows reality and not reality the plan. Those 4 pairs are the foundation of Agile thinking. You focus on individuals and their way to interact. You focus on delivering valuable results. Then again, you want to increase customer collaboration and trust. And in the end, you want to adapt your plans to match reality. Over the last 2 decades, we figured out that the manifesto is just one part of understanding Agile. When I look back at the last 2 decades of Agile, I see that there were 2 basic attempts in order to evolve the ideas. The first one was to make Agile accessible to broader organizations. While most of the ideas that you find formulated in Scrum or other frameworks were limited to one team and just a couple of people, we were searching for ways to employ the same ideas and principles in large organizations. People who figured out Agile scaling frameworks tried to expand their ideas in order to make it easy for big companies spanning the globe to pick up on Agile ideas. So they came up with new ways of working, new frameworks, new practices, and new rules that ended up in frameworks like SAFe, Nexus, LESS, or even Disciplined Agile. The other movement that I'm seeing is rather going back to the basics. They understand that Agile comes from a point of values and principles that you employ in order to evolve all the frameworks, practices, tools, and ideas that you use in your daily life. So their idea is to boil Agile down again from all the frameworks and reduce all the complexity, going to the point where you have a few guidelines that you can follow, and from that on, your Agile way of working will emerge. Personally, I'm more inclined with the second movement, because I think that Agile frameworks, processes, and tools and methods are just a way in order to enact Agile thinking. But Agile thinking is the one that matters. Being Agile in your head is more important than just playing by the rules. So you should understand what those values and principles are so that you can match Agile working to your context best. One way of understanding this Agile thinking in terms of values and principles is called Modern Agile. It starts off with the Agile Manifesto, but it also takes into account how Agile changed over the years and what we uncovered while practicing Agile principles. Modern Agile is based upon 4 principles that act as kind of a guideline for Agile thinking. The first of these principles is called Make People Awesome. The idea here is similar to the individuals and the actions of the Agile Manifesto. It is that in the end, everything we do is based upon people. People work in order to create results for other people to use. And our goal should be to let those people grow until their full potential is evolved. Our goal should be to develop and grow people and provide them with an environment so that they can unleash their full potential. They should be able to be awesome people and by that deliver awesome results. This is a position from which we can evolve ideas of self-organization, decision-making, leadership, and even the way we act with our users. The second principle we find in Modern Agile is called Deliver Value Continuously. The idea is that we should always deliver something that can be used by our stakeholders. By doing that, we get a win-win situation. With every small unit of work that we deliver, our stakeholders get something that they can use, where we can get feedback from them and also earn revenue while we're developing the thing. So that again leads us to the third principle of Modern Agile, which is learn and experiment rapidly. With every small step that we deliver and every decision that we make, we generate insights. We want to learn from those insights and start small experiments to change our behaviors and change our ideas to improve ourselves and the products and services that we employ. What sets Modern Agile apart from other ideas of thinking about Agile, for me, is the fourth principle. It's called Make Safety a Prerequisite. Would you use a backup software that by accident could delete your whole hard disk? Or would you sit in a new innovative electric car with brakes not fully tested? Or would you speak up about product or process improvements in an environment where you're scolded for speaking your mind? Most likely not. So safety should be an integral part of our work. That includes product and service safety on the one hand, but it also includes psychological safety as a foundation for great success. By thinking and acting aligned to those 4 principles, we are able to evolve all the Agile frameworks and methods that you might need in your context. So by employing Modern Agile thinking, you can come up with your own way of Agile working and evolve all the other ideas. With this view on Agile thinking in mind, you can go out there and find your own way of Agile working fitting to your organization, your context, and your company. And as a final thought, the best way to start working Agile is to start your first very own experiments with Agile thinking in mind. Be agile and deliver impact. Bye.